Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that wherever you are, you're safe and well. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marilyn Zakhour. I'm the CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs, and we're a leadership and organizational development firm. Today, you're joining us for our 7th annual Cosmic Conference, which is a 3-week virtual conference taking place between March 25th and April 17th. We usually have this conference in October, but because of everything that's happening around us, we decided that this conversation couldn't wait. We wanted to support leaders where they needed the most, and we chose to bring this year's edition forward and have this conversation now. Our conference is titled Grounded and Limitless, Leading Organizations That Survive and Thrive, and through the conference, we're hoping to support leaders as they manage prolonged uncertainty. And to explore this topic, we're bringing together more than 15 leaders, experts, and academics, although I think by now it's more than 20. And we want to collectively make sense of what is it that is actually asked of us in moments like these. How do we endure? Yes, that was the theme of last week. How do we survive these periods of uncertainty? But also, in this week, we're focused on how do we adapt? How do we evolve in response to change? And then next week, we're going to focus on thriving, how we turn the lessons learned in crisis into a competitive advantage, hopefully emerging stronger and more innovative and better prepared for the future on the other end of the crisis. As I said, today is the beginning of week 2. We're going to focus on how organizations can institutionalize creativity, strengthen relationships with clients and partners, and sense emerging shifts across industries. The team will be dropping the link to the remaining program in the chat below. And I want to particularly highlight a session that is happening on Wednesday morning, where we will be bringing together leaders from the private sector and professional services to talk about what we are seeing collectively in the market, how we are shifting the way in which we think of the value we're providing our clients, and how we deliver our work. Hopefully, the power of community can help us all to go through this period and come out of it in a better shape. Our speaker, Emad Odeh, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute, and I would love for you to actively participate. So please make sure you share your reflections, your questions, your experiences, your reactions in the chat. And if you know someone who might find value in our conversation, please go ahead and tag them so they can join us. One last thing I have to ask of you, if you do find value in any of our sessions, including today's, and you want to thank us, we have one way that you can give something back to us. We're conducting research to capture how leaders in our region are navigating this period so that others around the world can learn from us. We have a very short 5-minute survey on leading in the Arab world, which our team is going to share in the chat, and it would mean the world to us if you could complete it. Now to today's session, relationships and results, growing business in uncertain times. I'm extremely pleased to welcome Emad Odeh. Emad, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Allow me to introduce you and to introduce our discussion. So Emad is a seasoned investment executive. He's a deal maker, a strategic advisor with more than 30 years of experience in private equity, investment banking, and corporate leadership across the GCC, Europe, and the United States. He held senior roles at Bank Julius Baer, advising institutional investors, sovereign wealth funds, and ultra-high net worth clients on bespoke investment strategies and capital structuring. He was also managing partner at Capital Trust Group in Dubai, leading venture capital and private equity investments across the region. He previously served as Group CEO of Al Thani Investment, overseeing a diversified conglomerate and leading its transformation and expansion across multiple sectors. And today he serves as Investment Officer at Kingston Capital and Investment and Managing Partner at EOR Energy Services, where he focuses on deploying capital, driving growth, and advancing energy and sustainability solutions. He served as a board member and trusted advisor to organizations across sectors, bringing a strategic lens shaped by decades of navigating market cycles and complexity. With a strong network across industries and geographies, he offers a grounded, real-time perspective on how leaders can act and adapt in uncertain environments. Emad, we're thrilled to have you, and especially because as we look at the world around us, I've had many conversations with leaders over the last couple of weeks, past the first period of shock. We're now all looking into the market and trying to understand and trying to read what is going to come next. Some data tells us the global markets lost over $7 trillion in a single month because of the geopolitical tensions in the region. I've seen many different predictions on what GDP across the GCC is going to look like. I chose not to name any of them here today because none of them is going to be on the nose. I'm sure everybody's just trying to forecast and predict, but we can guarantee that there will be slower momentum. And everybody I've spoken to is obviously speaking of slow pipelines, projects being put on hold, sales cycles that are stretching out, projects being canceled altogether. And so we're all a little bit unsure about what the market will hold for us. And sometimes in these periods, we tend to pause, wait for clarity, hold back, maybe become more conservative. We don't want to be seen as overly eager to sell. And that's understandable. But at the same time, we do still have to go out to the market and find opportunities. And that's really what we're here to explore today. How can we adapt the way we approach business development in this kind of environment? And how to stay connected, relevant, continuing to create momentum, even with extremely unpredictable conditions. So, Imad, let's start us off. First of all, I like to check in with all of my speakers. How are you? It's week 5 or 6 now. How are you handling all of this? How are you doing?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess I'm a bit tense, but mostly reflective, focusing on the things that really matter, which is always a good place to be.
Yes, absolutely. We're all trying to do the same, definitely, and good days and bad days. But on the whole, we're trying to stay focused on what we can see and what we can do. And so let's jump right in. I think the first chapter that I have in any conversation about business development in this period is, what are you seeing, right? Because each of us is seeing maybe a slightly different portion of the market and is able to understand how some things are moving. From your perspective, what's happening in the market today in terms of pipeline, sales, growth, which industries are still active, which institutions? Tell us a little bit about what you're observing in the market today.
Okay, so I believe the market today is going through an unprecedented black swan type shock event. In times like this, I'm also seeing that businesses are repositioning, recalibrating, rebudgeting, and transforming their business models. That's what I'm seeing. Now, if to be specific on the pipelines and sales, in my investment space, the pipelines in our industry are healthy, they remain healthy, but the conversion rates actually will be very low, which elongates the sales cycles. What used to take us weeks now will take us months. All the changes are affecting all the business models, and their financials, of course. So our due diligence and our valuations and our offers have to change accordingly, and that's taken much longer. So this region is in uncharted territory. It has gone down the rabbit hole, if you like. And how deep it goes remains unclear because the situation, like you said, is still evolving. If I want to extend this metaphor, Alice emerged from the rabbit hole with clarity about her choices, just as the caterpillar Absalom, ultimately transformed into a butterfly. So I am certain we too shall come out through this stronger.
I really love the Alice in Wonderland metaphor, actually, because I gave a keynote just before all of this started. Even then, we were already continuing to talk about uncertainty. I think the illusion of certainty or predictability is something we all have to let go of. But I use the same metaphor to speak about how we can help to address uncertainty using Alice in Wonderland, because she, in fact, goes into the world when she follows the rabbit into a world where nothing behaves the way that it should. And at first, she tries to comply with the new rules of this world, but then finds out that the only way to leave the world is to return to herself and to be able to separate illusion from reality. So it's a really, really fitting metaphor,
You're right.
actually.
It's one of my favorite books. I think Lewis Carroll wrote one of the best novels ever. And I always try to find out, which character am I? Am I Absalom the caterpillar or am I the Mad Hatter?
I can give you that answer privately, Imad. So on that, again, no answers, but maybe like, let's say, even if we're blindfolded, we can try and sense. Are there any specific? Obviously, we can put defense on the side because obviously a lot of opportunities will come from that, I'm sure. Are there any other sectors that you think are going to be solid or at least drive the recovery that people should be looking towards?
Well, a sector, there's too many sectors, but let's talk about where we are, UAE and in Dubai specific. I believe the travel and tourism sector will show the biggest and quickest change right now. You can tell this because two of our lifelines, the airport, Dubai Airport, and Jabal Ali Port or DP World, together, they probably make about over 50% of Dubai's GDP. Now, these two are not at full capacity right now, not even close. So they affect the travel and tourism sector extremely quickly, and it affects more than 50% of the Dubai GDP. Also, there are so many ancillary services that contribute to the GDP that comes from this sector. But there's also the real estate sector, trade is also another sector. They will all be affected, yes. The impact cannot be ascertained right now because, like we said, we're still going through this evolving situation. So all sectors will be affected, but that doesn't mean that they'll be affected negatively, like from the previous crises. We came out of that, both crises actually with growth. So all of these sectors will be affected, but I think the focus should be on what do we do and where do we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the previous crisis. There's COVID. There's the 2008 crisis, and as you say, there's always we will recover. We will prevail at the end of this at some point. Maybe in which ways do you feel like today's crisis is similar to those? What can we learn from the past? But also, in which ways do you think it's completely different?
So, look, there are some lessons and patterns that we can learn from the previous crisis. Let's talk about the two previous crises in specific. So they were both previous crises were actually global. This current conflict we're in is actually regional. Okay, so that's a little bit of a difference there, but it's important. Also, to be accurate, you got to be specific. And in 2008 financial crisis, it exposed the risks of over leverage for quick gains, of course, while the COVID crisis exposed the weaknesses of unprepared businesses to quickly transform. So these are two very valuable lessons that we learned. However, your leaders, as you call them, navigating today's VUCA environment, probably will look outwards and inwards. Outwards, they will spot shifts in market and customer behavior. Okay, but I think the more challenging task lies when they look inwards, critically assessing their own business models and asking how prepared they are for the transformation required to stay relevant tomorrow. So I think leaders should look at where value could be created, not where value is at present, and strategize accordingly.
Yeah, I really appreciate that point, Imad, around managing the present and the future and looking inwards and outwards. It is extremely difficult to manage, what is happening around us right now, but we can always look at what in a way will not change or what we can be sure will be in demand in the future and build towards it. That's as long as we have a sufficiently financially healthy business that can take a few months of slowed revenue, but also look internally at where you might have been okay with something that was slightly inefficient in the past and maybe now's a cleanup job is necessary and will force you to make some of the hard decisions that maybe you were delaying as a leader. So I really love this perspective on where you should place your attention and your focus. Are we starting to see, government obviously is going to play a big role in supporting businesses through this and in the recovery. Have you started to see any, specific initiatives or support worth noting around how small, medium businesses are being supported, or even larger organizations? In COVID, there were regulatory restrictions and changes. There was maybe more flexibility around putting people on furlough, etc. That's not the case yet today, but are we starting to see any of these examples come through?
Yes, of course. Actually, the UAE Central Bank, for instance, has approved 1 trillion dirhams in what they called, I think, is a financial resilience package in cash to banks, to ensure liquidity, which keeps credit flowing into the economy. Now, this will make banks more willing to lend and easier to secure, for instance, working capital. That's a major package that the UAE Central Bank has approved. Also, we know about the Dubai Executive Council approved a few days ago 1 billion dirhams as a support initiative for businesses, reducing or deferring fees, etc. These two packages in specific aim to support, Marilyn, the businesses and boost confidence. Now, there is talk of more to come. So your leaders should keep their eyes and ears open to those.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, the government is being pulled in 6,000 directions, so a little bit of patience. But already the rapid movement to support businesses is already, as you said, there are a couple of examples. I'm sure more will come. All right. Well, that's what the government could do to help us. Let's talk about what we can do to help ourselves. There's of course, we're seeing that growth is stalled, or at best, if not completely, stopped. I want to talk about how leaders can continue to grow their revenue, continue to kind of reinforce the financial sustainability of their firms in this process. We often, when we teach business development to leaders, we often talk to them about hunting, farming, and cultivating, which is hunting is going out to find new opportunities. Farming is expanding your existing clients and accounts, and cultivating is fixing your internal processes, your delivery models, etc. Where would you focus your attention today on your existing customer base versus looking for new opportunities?
Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to make a little comment. I don't think growth in a crisis has stalled, but we can come back to this later. I think there's still opportunities. But to talk about your, hunting and farming, in a situation like today. So with existing clients, which are farming, the trust and credibility is already established. So organization, which actually invested significant amount of time and resources to build those relationships. So focusing there is what I call playing defense, but it's a critical move to protect and expand current revenues. Now, at the same time, you have pursuing new opportunities, which you call hunting, which is essential for growth and market share. This is what I call offensive side. So where you actively seek out new clients and segments. You also mentioned cultivating. So if you mean by, cultivating your team's capabilities and offering, this should be aligned to support both the offense and defensive plans that you have. Tailoring to whether you're defending your core businesses or driving new growth, and your leaders will ultimately need to run both tracks in parallel, but with distinct strategies, offense and defense, and continuously rebalancing based on how the market evolves.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. I think even just taking what we've done as a firm, we are, of course, remaining in touch and in support of our existing clients and accounts. We have not stopped reaching out, but maybe we'll talk about it later. Like our approach to how we reach out to the market is adapted, but we are definitely looking into our capacity, our capabilities, what we deliver, and adjusting our product offering to what we believe people are going to be interested today. You said that you don't think that growth is stalled. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, you mentioned that because look, I don't think growth becomes impossible. Actually, it becomes more selective, if I'm to choose the right word. So people usually measure growth by targets and forecasts and what have you. And those are all based on assumptions for given parameters in a market economy. When those parameters change and are no longer valid, and then you go back and you adjust your assumptions accordingly to make targets more attainable. Now, that's just one of the measures of growth. Now, of course, today we have this geopolitical crisis, definitely making growth more challenging. There's a lot of uncertainty, disrupted supply chains, shifting demands, and in some cases, targets will be impossible to meet. But in these environments, companies that adapt quickly by doing whatever they have to do, reallocating resources, focusing on resilient markets or segments, and staying close to customer needs, can still find growth opportunities. In fact, from my experience, some organizations gain market share during crisis because others pull back. So there are still opportunities, but like I said, you got to be selective. And I say, for your leaders, that you need to be realistic about today's risks, but also strategize about or identifying where growth is still achievable. So that's what they have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The market does not go to zero just because we're in a crisis. There is still business to be made, but you have to be maybe sharper. And in some ways, like maybe you should have always been really sharp about it, but now you don't have a choice. You're being forced to sharpen your axe in terms of identifying those opportunities, being able to go after them. You yourself, had led your own businesses and consultancies during a number of crises. Had to make these pivots within your own, within your own firm. How did you approach that? What advice do you have for people in terms of driving this growth within their organization and how they think about what they're delivering to the market?
Well, so for your leaders have a dual responsibility, protecting the business today, like I said, while positioning it for tomorrow. Astute leaders balance those horizons. They make decisions that address the immediate critical needs now while keeping a clear focus on long-term opportunities. I believe that's how you balance these things.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question here from the audience from Sabah. She says, how do you personally recognize a hidden opportunity?
Well, it's a good question, Sabah. It depends. So if it is hidden, is it sending clear signals or is it just noise? Okay. To be accurate, you got to be specific. Every case has to be examined to know all the details about it. But you really, have to change your perspective during a crisis to look for these opportunities. Find out which one has intrinsic value, which has potential for growth, not for today, like I said, for the future.
Emad, how do you sense the market yourself? Like, what are some down to earth practices that allow you, as you say, to separate the signal from the noise? and to be able to kind of get an instinctive feel of where the market is headed, and what it is asking for.
Well, I guess I guard against confirmation bias. So I find out where I was wrong, and I try to always challenge my own assumptions and look for different perspective to prove where I was wrong. So that this is one of the things that I do, that I always question my assumptions and wait for signals to prove to me that I was wrong, so I can go back and develop and change it. So that's just one of the things that I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in this time, we rely on the wisdom of community. The more people you talk to, and the more you listen to what they're seeing, what they're sensing, what their perspective is, and then you combine them together, and suddenly you start seeing patterns that feel more solid than others. So one thing is adapting how you listen to the market. Another is adapting how you sell. When we were preparing for this, you said you don't stop selling, but you change the approach. What does that look like in practice?
Okay, you do change the approach and the mechanism, but you actually has to adapt. So, for example, instead of pushing large long-term deals, you might break the offerings into smaller, lower risk entry points to reduce the client's hesitation. Okay, this is one of the things. You also shift from maybe a purely growth-driven pitch to a value and risk mitigation conversation, focusing on cost savings, efficiency, resilience, which are more relevant during uncertain times, of course. So the goal remains, the same, is growth and sales, but the mechanism change and it becomes more adaptive, targeting and aligned with what clients are comfortable committing to at that moment. So you change and you adapt those things.
Yeah, I want to resonate with that. So we're saying change kind of the delivery model. Don't ask them to commit for long-term things. Maybe take on a little bit more of the risk yourself. Every little bit, contributes. And so being more flexible on how much you sell, what they commit to. And I really love your point. I think we made it also this morning. One of the things we had this morning was we had a session that was called the manager mailbag, where managers sent us questions and we helped help them deal with situations that they're dealing with. And one of them was around convincing the leadership of a company to do something. Now, this was an internal case, but it was a similar answer. It was like, talk to them in their language. What is it that they're worried right now? What is it that they're going to be willing to pay for? Maybe it's not growth, because no one is predicting growth. As you say, value management, risk assessment, or risk management. These are the things that are high on the list of priorities of leaders right now. And if you're able to tune into those needs and those pain points and support them, then budgets may become available for that. I think that's a really great point. And in terms of like the shift in selling to, how do you stay focused on the relationship aspect with your clients or potential clients, stay human and not transactional? Do you have any perspective there?
Yes, well, with your clients, if it, you can be valuable without being transactional. That's one of the things. You can, like we said, you change the approach. You listen to what the clients actually need, where their pain spots, and you approach things that way. It's You have to rebuild that trust by listening, becoming closer to your client, to your customer base, and really hearing what they have to say. And then you go back, and don't sell, and then you go back and come out with alternative and options that helps them.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely staying close to them, being in support and in service of their, ambitions and their needs at the moment, and then being there at the right time, I suppose. We have a question here from Faisal. This is maybe closer to some of what you do on the energy side. What are some misconceptions about energy-related opportunities at this moment? What are we missing?
Sorry, what's the question?
What are what are some misconceptions about opportunities related to the energy sector during this moment, in your view?
Okay, so the energy sector is one of the biggest sectors in the world. You have the upstream, you have the midstream, the transportations, and all of that, and then you have the downstream. So each sector or each part of the energy sector is going through some major changes. So I cannot be specific unless this Mr. Faisal can give me exactly which part is he looking for, and maybe I can comment. But it's a huge look. I said before that this is a regional conflict. Yes, it's true, but the reach and the extent is global. Now, the rest of the world is trying to resolve and help resolve this because of the energy situation. They're affected, not just us. They're affected. So they're also. I mean, I don't know which sector Faisal is actually involved in, but they're exploring right now a lot of alternative corridors. The UAE has many reserves in many countries like Japan and South Korea, and they're telling these countries you can go ahead and tap into these reserves. So there's also corridors that are being discussed between Oman and Saudi into the UAE. So all of these things, affect the energy sector, and these could, by the way, be opportunities in the future.
Yes, I remember you speaking to me about trucks when we met.
Yes, yes. Yeah, because right now a lot of because of the our Hormuz state is closed mostly 95%. So one of the alternative routes, the ships are going through Jeddah or Oman, and they be and these the oil and the diesel and the gasoline is being shipped by trucks from Jeddah to UAE to Qatar to Bahrain to whoever. So I was telling one of the investors, you should invest in trucks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always interesting to see where unusual things will come from. Do you have a story actually about a deal or opportunity that came together in an unexpected way? Anything from your past that you want to share with us?
In an unexpected way.
Yeah.
Yes. So when I worked in the US back in the late 80s and 90s, I worked with an investment company, and we were actually buying convertible notes from banks and institutions that are called the savings and loans. We were buying these notes because they gave us very high interests, and they were convertible notes. When the savings and loans collapsed because they were giving away too much interest, the government created the RTC, Resolution Trust Corporation, and they allowed us to convert the debt that we had into equity. So it came because of the crisis that the savings and loans, which was mostly southern and western US regions. And so that opportunity came in a crisis, first of all, like this one. And what made it materialize was the regulatory authority, which was the government, because these savings and loans were insured by the federal government, FDIC insured, changed the regulation, which gave us the mechanism to convert everything to equity. And we went from a 30, $40 million company to 300, $400 million company by changing those and developing these assets. So that's a story that I can tell you that came from a crisis.
How lucky to be on the good side of a regulatory change, Emad.
Well, that's, you gotta be connected, and you gotta know, when these things happen. We didn't know that they will collapse on this, but we went in it for the high interest actually. But we had a structure that it's a convertible note. We can convert the debt into equity, which is what we did.
Oh, yeah, it's good to have that kind of flexibility and foresight. So you said you got to be connected. I wanted to talk to you about relationships and about the power of community. You are someone who is always well surrounded. You are a community builder. I know that from being around you. What roles do relationships and community play in helping navigate uncertainty, continue to drive business growth, be on the right side of some of these transactions?
Oh, okay. Good question. Look, relationships and community engagement is an extension of your business. It's actually a catalyst to drive growth and an enabler of new opportunities. I do focus a lot on that, and I invest a lot of my time and resources into that because it actually goes back to what I learned from my father, Marilyn. My father used to go to one of two places every day for 5 days in Palestine. One is in our house, he had a grapevine arbor that he sat with and did his shisha, and all his friends and neighbors came, to that. The next day, he will go to the Central Cafe, Central was the name, and he meets with the community at large. In these situations, in the both situations, gave him the intelligence and the exposure to build businesses that the community needed. So I was the little boy in both situations, either bringing coffee or tea, or actually bringing charcoal for the shishas that they do. And when I go to the Central Cafe, I was the guy who my dad would let me do the chores. Go call so-and-so because we need to discuss this. So, but I was always listening to what is happening. And I grew up learning that that's the way business is done. I didn't know any other idea. He built a road construction company because of that. He built an engineering office because of that. He built a construction material company because of this. So growing up, thinking that that's the way business, and when I moved back to the UAE, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur, be on my own, I knew that I had to do something about that. I need to create that space. I needed to create, this venue, this format where people can come and we can share so I can get ideas. And that's what I did.
Yes, you are famous for your majlis. And I'm sure there have been many great conversations there. In which way, like now that you've recreated this space for yourself, do you have any great stories about how the majlis has helped you both navigate uncertain times and also continue to grow your business over time?
Sure. Look, the majlis, my majlis is just a format. The principle is really what matters. So I needed to be consistent and intentional touching points with my friends, my family, and my actually colleagues, and the community at large. And I created this space for them to feel comfortable sharing openly. Now, I stayed close to my network because of that. I created a space where real dialogue is happening, and I listened, of course, and that's what turns relationships into a sort of insight and keeps you sharp and grounded. So the whole idea of this majlis it's a format. You want to create this so that you can look for opportunities, hear what the community wants. A lot of people that actually came to the majlis did businesses with each other. So that, it also, my majlis made me tap into a kind of collective intelligence, getting different perspective, which of course broadened my horizon and helped me stay grounded and better equipped to make decisions, especially in uncertain times.
Yes, absolutely. We feel that way about the Cosmic Conference too. We get to tap into the hive, the collective wisdom, extract insights and opportunities, and it enables all of us. Like you, actually, when I introduced the conference, I was telling everybody that not only do we have people who have made business deals together, we have people who have gotten married because of the Cosmic Conference.
Yes,
So
yes.
it feels like our majlis is this. And it's definitely a place for all of us to become more resilient and grow together. If you don't have the opportunity, like you, to build a majlis, or like me to have a conference, what would you say are the minimum things that people need to do to stay connected to collective wisdom?
Again, you build a relationship, okay, and you stay close to your clients, with certain touch points and in certain places. So whatever that takes. Now, I know a lot of people, they don't have a majlis and they don't have cosmic centaurs. They actually meet in coffee shops in the mall. So and they sit down and they share stories, or if somebody needs help or if somebody's looking for an opportunity. So they need to do that. That's a very important. And like I told you, when I was young, I grew up thinking that's the way business should be done, so I didn't know any other way. So they need to do something like that.
Yeah. As someone, I grew up with two parents who couldn't be more different from each other. So my mother is very kind of driven by like excellence and delivering great results and your work speaking for itself. My father was a bit more like you, or your father is a bit more of a hustler, a people person, a networker, like tapping into opportunities that others couldn't see. For a very long time as a leader, I was more on my mother's side in terms of really believing like I should just focus on the work, not actually being very good at the relationship piece. Sometimes even finding that these endless conversations that went around in circles were a waste of everybody's time. Could we please get to the thing we were here to talk about? And it took me a really long time, and probably moving to the region here, to start to see the gold that was hidden under what at first can just seem like people hanging out. So
Yeah,
I
yes.
think that for leaders who, like me, start off more on the task side, they don't naturally kind of fall into the relationship side of the world. That can at first seem a little difficult and sometimes feel like a bit of a waste of time. But when you do it over time and you see the insights that you end up extracting from these conversations, it really kind of brings that home. But of course, there's still the pressure to deliver results. And so how do you think about balancing the time you take to invest in relationship with the need to drive, outcomes? As a business leader, no one's going to yell at me. It's my business survives or it doesn't, but not everybody is in this position. So we do have to balance the two. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I don't see, first of all, investing in relationship and driving outcomes as competing priorities. They actually reinforce each other. And the best way to balance both is stop treating relationship as something separate from performance, really.
I love that. That's a bit of a mic drop moment. I think that's a really good one. No, and it's true. Like I said, it took me years to integrate the two back with one another. And so I can see how for some people they might sound difficult. What's a good question? This is a bit off script, Imad, but for some of us, like when you're talking to someone you don't know very well, it can be intimidating. Do you have a go-to, like a question that you ask people to get the conversation going?
Do I have, sorry?
Do you have a go-to, like conversation opener, a question you ask everybody? Like, do you have tricks that you want to give us around how to have a chat with someone you don't know very well?
Sure. I can tell you, usually I go in, one of the tricks, saying I don't have the answers. I don't have all the answers. It brings people down to a human level. Okay. They start the conversation, the discussion. So that's one of the tricks. I always say, by the way, don't ask me what's going to happen with this crisis because I don't know. Nobody knows. So you come in from a human level and you'll be amazed at what feedback you get and what opportunities you get and how interesting it is and how rewarding, but that's what I advise people to approach it. Now, when we were in the States, by the way, any meeting we went to, the first 10-15 minutes we needed to talk about football or basketball. here it's a bit easier because the first thing we discuss when they see me, how did Liverpool do last week? So always start with something that is unrelated to what you're going for,
Sure.
and that is important.
I really love your trick around going in not having all the answers. I think we spend a lot of time trying to demonstrate our competence when we meet others, when in fact, what you're telling us is to demonstrate our curiosity and be willing to show up without any answers, but just a few good questions. I think that's really wise.
Yeah.
And you've actually you were giving us an example from the US and from here you've worked across industries, from oil and gas to startups, from the US to the GCC. What are some of the things that you've seen are the most important in terms of building trust with others?
Building trust. So to build a long-lasting trust, you gotta be consistent in performance. That's important. You have to be authentic, have the right intent. So these, to build trust, in my experience, is built in the absence of a transaction. But you prove it when they finally happen. But trust is something that you build. I build it with my wife. I build it with my kids. It's the smaller steps that actually creates the trust, not the transaction. The transaction just is something that's the number. Okay, that's the figures. And I always say, and this is maybe another trick that people could use. When you always go to meet a client, a customer, or whatever, there's always two things that you're going to be discussing. One is the story, and the other are the figures or the numbers. Okay, people buy the story more than the numbers. Okay, so you build the trust by telling them a good story. So focus on the story. That's what lawyers do. The numbers, don't take a CFO into a meeting. That's not a good idea.
Fair enough. Absolutely. That's a really great point. Sabah tells us her grandmother had a trick of asking strangers, "Where did I see you before? You look familiar," to open a conversation with them. That's a good one. There's a really great question from Razan. I want to take it before we kind of get close to the end of our discussion today. very practically, Razan asked, how often should you be nurturing a relationship? Meaning, how often should you be in touch with a relationship that is important to you?
Uh, Again, it's nurturing the relationship is doing the smaller steps, showing up without a transaction, checking on them, finding out how they're doing, become closer to them. That is so critically important, you know. Again, that's how you separate, the relationship from the performance. You need to do that to gain their trust. So I always think that small, regular touch points build far more trust than showing up when you need a transaction. Okay, and another trait: shift from talking to listening. Show up occasionally without a transaction, but sit down and listen. So these are 2 to 3 things that I think they should start doing differently if they don't do it already.
Yeah. And I really resonate with you. And I say again, as being someone who will default to finishing a task before I default to calling someone, I've had to build systems for myself because now, I care about more people. Cosmic Centers has brought a lot more people into my life that I want to be present for. And also I got really busy, right? Because we work, consultants work a good 12, 14 hours days. And so sometimes by the end of it, you don't have time to think about who you haven't checked in on. So I also really believe in systems, honestly. Like I know that like once a week, especially on Friday afternoons when I start to be a bit like, my brain's not working that well anymore in terms of finishing any work, I'll dedicate time to say like, who haven't I checked in on in a while? I'll
Mm.
literally like go through my WhatsApp and be like, oh, like X, Abdurrahman, I haven't called him. Let's see
Yes.
how he's doing. And so I really I try to plan these moments in. Obviously, when it comes to important milestones or big, religious holidays or whatever it is, like it is really, Tala and I always joke that people who grew up in this region are very good at stakeholder engagement because we all have 7 uncles and 8 aunts on this each sides of our parents, and we know that if we invite this aunt before the other one, even if we're inviting them to the same event, we're going to get in trouble. And so I think we build that sensitivity around making sure that we show up often, that we tell them they're on our mind, that we also ask about their families and all of their other roles in their lives, and try to show up as much as we can.
Very, very important. Very
Yeah.
important.
And I think building systems for that, if it doesn't come naturally to you, block time in your calendar. People
Or
don't care.
you can build a majlis.
Or that. Easy. And make sure it's full every Friday or Saturday.
Right.
But thank you so much for those insights, Ahmad. We're coming to the end of our discussion today, but we don't want to let you go before we extract maybe a few more small nuggets of wisdom with our lightning round questions. Those are 4 questions that we ask every single one of our speakers. If you're ready, I can ask you those 4 questions.
Shoot, yes, I'm ready.
All right. So speaking of you, what keeps you personally grounded in this moment?
Personally grounded.
Mhm.
I tell myself, this too shall pass.
Yes, that's really wise. Remembering that everything is temporary, nothing lasts, and that we will emerge on the other side. Absolutely. And what is helping you to stay limitless, to keep possibility,
You know what?
imagination?
I
Yeah.
also I needed to mention this, but pale blue dot is a very important and probably the most grounding perspective that was ever given to us by the famous astronomer Carl Sagan in his book Cosmos. So, pale blue dot is a picture of the our galaxy, and there's an arrow that points onto a tiny little dot, which he called it pale blue dot. It came from Voyager, that just before it left our heliosphere, the our solar system, it turned its antenna and took that picture. And Carl Sagan put it in his book and series to say that everything that ever happened and everyone that has ever lived all happened on this tiny dot. So that's also grounding to me. So I suggest you say to yourself, this too shall pass, while looking at that picture.
Couldn't agree more, honestly. One of the questions we ask people when we first meet them is, what's your favorite tree and why? And one of mine is a 400-year-old oak tree in Severnake Forest in the UK. And I remember standing in front of it and getting this exact same feeling, which is that I am actually really not all that important. There has been 400 years of this tree being here, and it watched many generations of people pass under it. And in the grand schema of things, we are just on a pale blue dot, as you say.
Yes, yes, yes.
Everything will pass, including us.
About limitless,
Mhm.
what helps me be limitless, other than drugs and alcohol? I think sometimes, actually, it's a mindset that my father taught me. He said, the day you stop learning, you start growing older. And the day you learn, you stay young. This really stuck with me. And I think if there's something called me being limitless, is learning because of the mindset that my father left me with.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Learning and renewal is how anything in nature stays alive. Otherwise, it dies. What is a leadership quality from the Arab world that the rest of the world can learn from?
From the Arab world,
Hmm.
where there's so many. Arabs are so full of wisdom. But if I am to choose something, there is something that I also use in Arabic a lot of the time. It's actually a verse from the Quran that inspired
Hmm.
Arabs for centuries. لا تكرهوا شيئا لعله خيرا لكم. So it is telling, do not hate or dislike a thing because there could be goodness or a benefit for you. So I like that. لا تكرهوا شيئا خيرا لكم. It has a lot of meaning. It's a lot of wisdom, divine and what have you, that can inspire you. And I think the Arabs use it all the time, and maybe the rest of the world should use it.
Yes, absolutely. It allows us to be a bit more patient with what at first can seem like a negative event and wait for the second order effects, because maybe they will turn out to be good for us.
Yeah.
And last question for you, Imad, based on our conversation and all the wisdom that you shared today, what would you say are like the top three things that you would tell leaders to do right now in order to continue growing their business and developing it?
Okay, so right now, I guess it's critical, which is what probably your leaders are also looking at. I tell them, keep looking until you find a pattern that are cyclical in your business. That is very important, and this will help you position your company, today and tomorrow. So keep looking until you find that pattern. Now, patterns are becoming a bit more complicated, and there's even companies that actually can help you do that. Palantir is one of them. I'm not telling you to go there because I don't like them. But the other thing that I will tell your leaders, there's a Latin phrase called Occam's razor. Occam's razor, it's actually it states it's a philosophical proverb from a book by a guy called Willem of Ockham back in the 14th century. He's English, but he wrote in Latin that given all the explanations and the hypotheses, the one that is right is the simplest one. So Occam's razor, I use that razor, by the way, because it shaves all of the complexities, And I think that's very important for them to remove all the noise, remove everything, and go to the simplest one, because that's probably the best explanation they could come out with, you know. And the last thing I tell your leaders is relax and go have a drink and a cigar.
And if you guys want to be invited to Imad's Majlis, we are taking applications.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Absolutely. I love Occam's razor. I really love mental models in general. There's another one I love called Hanlon's razor, which is to attribute things to incompetence before you attribute them to malice. I really think, Imad, there's a lot of wisdom in these models, in these mental models. So I love that you mentioned that one. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your time, your stories from all the way when you were a kid to the US to here. I think you'll see later from the reactions in the chat, there's a lot that resonated with people. We're very, very grateful for your time and your insights.
Well, thank you very much. And I think this is a wonderful forum that you're done. Whoever came out with this idea of this conference at this time, kudos to that. It's wonderful. I need it. Everybody needs it. It's an amazing, platform. So congratulations on that. And I wish you all the success.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I take no credit for this. This was Tala in our brainstorm around what are we going to do, who said, I think we should move the conference up. And we all wholeheartedly agreed with her.
Yes.
So now we are not sleeping, but at least we're happy.
Absolutely. Well, good to see you again, Marilyn. Thank you so much.
Likewise. And thanks to everybody who tuned in with us today. I know we had a few connection problems, but hopefully everybody was able to join the conversation. A few more questions left in the chat, which maybe we'll respond to later. This will be available on YouTube and as a podcast if you want to re-listen to it or send it to someone who might find value in it. And of course, if you can, we would be extremely grateful for your contribution to our research on leading in the Arab world. We have a survey. It literally takes 4 minutes to fill it out. We'd love to be able to combine wisdom from the region and tell the rest of the world what they can learn about leading in uncertainty from here. And it would really mean a lot to us if our audience members could contribute to it. We are going to continue these conversations. As Imad said, we're hoping that they're answering some much needed questions for leaders in the region. We have webinars, we have leaders circles. As I said, week 2, adapt. Let me maybe tell you about what's coming up right next after today. Tomorrow, April 7th at 12 p.m. we're going to be hosting Maya Ibrahim Shah, who is the founder of Beit al-Baraka and Beit Kanz. If you're Lebanese or have been to Lebanon in the last few years, you know how much this association has done to build community infrastructure at scale. Her session is in fact titled Dignity and Hospitality, Turning Crisis into Community Infrastructure at Scale. So please do join us. She has a beautiful story, a very important message, but also is doing a lot of really great work on the ground. We'll be talking about how organizations move from relief to systems while preserving dignity and how they respond. And on Wednesday morning, as I said earlier, we're running an online roundtable for professional services, professionals, to talk about what are we seeing in the market. So Imad gave us some of his perspective, but we'll be zooming in on this particular industry. We want to bring our collective, it's going to be our version of the Majlis, let's put it that way. So if you want to understand what's changing in our industry and how to adapt, please join us. We'll drop the link to register for that. And that's that. We obviously have more sessions coming later in the week. Stay tuned so you can join us, and we hope to see you again all soon. Stay safe until the next session.